"Rachel, you need to call me immediately. Your sister accessed your mother's accounts." Those words from my mom's financial advisor hit me like ice water on a Thursday afternoon in Austin. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen during a work meeting, trying to process what Carol had just said in her voicemail. "My name is Rachel, and I'm 31 years old. For the past 6 years, I've been working as a data analyst for a tech startup in Austin, Texas. I'd moved here right after grad school, building a career and a life far from the small town in Ohio where I grew up. My older sister Diane was 35, married with 2 kids, and had stayed in our hometown of Marietta. She'd always made it clear that she thought my moving away was selfish, that I should have stayed closer to family. Mom had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago. I'd flown home immediately, staying for 2 weeks before my boss told me I needed to come back or risk losing my job. Diane had volunteered to be Mom's primary caregiver, and at the time, I'd been grateful. I called Mom every single day, sent care packages, flew home once a month for long weekends. But Diane made sure everyone knew she was the one doing the real work, the one actually there. Mom passed away 3 days ago. I'd been on a red-eye flight when it happened, racing to get there in time but arriving 2 hours too late. The funeral was yesterday, a small service at the Methodist church, where Mom had gone since she was a child. Diane had organized everything, accepting condolences and sympathy with practiced grace, while I stood numbly beside the casket, wishing I'd been there to hold Mom's hand at the end. Now I was back in Austin, supposed to be working but unable to focus. I called Carol back immediately, my hands shaking. "What do you mean Diane accessed Mom's accounts?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Carol sighed heavily. "Rachel, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but your mother trusted me for 30 years and I think she'd want you to know. Over the past 6 months, there have been significant withdrawals from your mother's savings account, the account that had approximately $280,000 in it." My stomach dropped. $280,000. Mom had been a high school principal for 35 years, living modestly, saving carefully. She'd told me once that she wanted to leave something for Diane and me, to help us both build secure futures. "How much was withdrawn?" I asked quietly. $263,000, in increments ranging from $5,000 to $30,000 over the past 6 months. Your sister had power of attorney, so technically she had authorization to make withdrawals. But Rachel, your mother's medical expenses were nowhere near that amount. I have all the bills. Medicare covered most of it. The out-of-pocket costs were maybe $45,000. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Where did the rest go? I can't say for certain, but I did notice that your sister purchased a new house about 3 months ago. A rather expensive one in the new development on Miller Road. And I saw her driving a brand new Escalade at the funeral yesterday. I sat in silence, trying to comprehend what Carol was telling me. While I'd been working 12-hour days to save up for my monthly flights home, while I'd been sending money to help with Mom's care, Diane had been systematically draining Mom's life savings to upgrade her lifestyle. "What about the will?" I asked. "What did Mom leave?" Carol's voice softened. "Your mother's will stated that all remaining assets were to be divided equally between you and your sister. But Rachel, if the account has been depleted before death, there's nothing to divide. Your sister would have gotten her half anyway. This way, she got almost everything. Can she do that? Is it legal? That's a question for a lawyer, not a financial advisor. But I thought you should know. Your mother worked so hard for that money. She talked about wanting to help you both. This just doesn't sit right with me." After I hung up, I sat frozen in my apartment, rage and grief warring inside me. Diane had stolen from our dying mother. She'd watched Mom waste away, had held her hand and wiped her tears, all while siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars into her own accounts. And I'd been so focused on my own grief that I hadn't thought to question anything. I started thinking back to the funeral, to things Diane had said. When our Aunt Patricia had asked about Mom's estate, Diane had shrugged sadly and said, "She didn't leave much. Medical bills ate up everything. We're just grateful she had good insurance." I'd nodded along, not questioning it, assuming Diane knew what she was talking about since she'd been handling everything. But it had all been a lie. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Patricia. "Rachel, honey, I just got off the phone with Carol. She called me because she wasn't sure if she should have told you, but I told her she absolutely should have. Are you okay?" "I'm trying to process it," I said honestly. Aunt Patricia had been Mom's sister, closest confidant, and the only other person besides Carol who knew the full details of Mom's finances. Your mother told me last year that she was leaving you and Diane each about $140,000. She was so proud that she could help you both. When Diane told me yesterday that there was nothing left, I was shocked. Your mom was so careful with money. So I called Carol to ask what happened. And Carol told you about the withdrawals? Yes. Rachel, I think you need to get a lawyer. This doesn't smell right. Power of attorney is supposed to be used for the benefit of the person, not for personal enrichment. If Diane was taking money beyond what was needed for your mother's care, that's financial abuse. Financial abuse. The words made me feel sick. But how do I prove that? Diane will say it all went to medical expenses, to making mom comfortable. Carol has all the medical bills. She's willing to provide documentation. And I can testify about what your mother told me she was leaving you both. But you need a lawyer, and you need one fast before Diane has time to cover her tracks or spend what's left. I spent that evening researching lawyers in Ohio. I found one named David Martinez who specialized in estate fraud and elder abuse. His reviews were excellent, with multiple clients praising his thoroughness and compassion. I called his office first thing Friday morning and managed to get an emergency consultation for Monday. The weekend was torture. I couldn't stop thinking about Diane, about how she'd hugged me at the funeral with tears in her eyes, how she'd said, "At least we have each other now." The whole time, she'd known she'd stolen our inheritance, stolen Mom's legacy, and she'd looked me in the eye and lied. I flew back to Ohio Sunday night, telling my boss I needed another week for family matters. I didn't tell Diane I was coming. I stayed at a hotel near Carol's office. Monday morning, I met with David Martinez. He was in his late 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that made me feel like I was finally being taken seriously. "Walk me through everything," he said, setting up a recorder with my permission. I told him about Mom's illness, about Diane's role as caregiver and power of attorney holder, about Carol's revelation, about the timing of Diane's new house and car purchases. David took notes, nodding occasionally, his expression growing more serious. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Rachel, what your sister did is called financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. In Ohio, power of attorney is a fiduciary relationship. That means your sister was legally obligated to act in your mother's best interest, not her own. If she was taking money beyond what was needed for your mother's care and using it for personal expenses, that's a violation of her fiduciary duty. It could also be considered theft." "Can we get the money back?" I asked. "That depends on several factors. First, we need to document exactly how much was taken and how it was used. Second, we need to determine if your sister still has the money or if it's been spent. If she used it as a down payment on a house, that house could potentially be claimed as an asset. Third, we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the harder it becomes to trace funds and prove wrongdoing. What's the first step? I'm going to file a complaint with the probate court challenging the estate settlement. I'll request a full accounting of all transactions made under the power of attorney. I'll also request that any remaining funds be frozen pending investigation. But Rachel, I need to warn you that this is going to get ugly. Your sister is going to fight this. Your family is going to be forced to take sides." I thought about Mom, about how hard she'd worked, about the life insurance policy she'd maintained for years just so she could leave us something. "She doesn't get to steal from our mother and walk away," I said firmly. "I don't care how ugly it gets." David filed the paperwork that afternoon. By Tuesday evening, Diane had been served with the complaint. She called me at 9 that night, her voice shaking with rage. "What the hell did you do?" she screamed before I could even say hello. "You filed a lawsuit against me? Your own sister?" "You stole Mom's money," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "You had power of attorney, and you used it to drain her accounts while she was dying." "I didn't steal anything. That money was for Mom's care." "Do you have any idea how expensive everything was? The medications, the hospital visits, the home health aides?" "Carol has all the bills, Diane. The total was about $45,000. You took $263,000. There was a long pause. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said finally, her voice cold now instead of angry. "I managed everything while you were off living your life in Texas. I was the one who sat with her through chemotherapy. I was the one who changed her sheets when she was too weak to get out of bed. I was the one who held her hand when she died, because you couldn't be bothered to get here in time." The words hit like a physical blow, striking right at my deepest guilt. I had missed Mom's death by 2 hours, but I pushed through the pain. None of that gives you the right to steal from her. Mom wanted to leave both of us something. She told Aunt Patricia she was leaving us each about $140,000. You took almost all of it. Aunt Patricia, Diane spat. Of course she's involved in this. She never liked me, always thought I wasn't good enough for this family. This isn't about Aunt Patricia. This is about you violating Mom's trust and stealing from her while she was dying. How could you do that, Diane? How could you look at her every day, knowing you were stealing from her? I provided care for 8 months, Diane shouted. 8 months of my life, Rachel. I put my kids second. I dealt with my husband complaining that I was never home. I sacrificed everything. You think $140,000 is too much compensation for that? It wasn't yours to take. Mom had power of attorney over her own money. You were supposed to use it for her benefit, not yours. You entitled little brat, Diane hissed. You waltz back into town, playing the grieving daughter after abandoning Mom for years, and now you want to take money that I earned through months of actual caregiving. Well, it's not going to happen. I'll fight you on this, and everyone in this family is going to know what you really are. A selfish, greedy person who's trying to profit off our mother's death. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my hotel room, shaking, tears streaming down my face. Part of me wondered if Diane was right. Had I abandoned Mom? Should I have quit my job and moved home? But another part of me knew the truth. I'd done everything I could while maintaining the career I'd built. I'd called every day, visited as often as possible, sent money to help, and even if I hadn't, even if I had been a terrible daughter, that wouldn't give Diane the right to steal. Over the next few days, David worked methodically to build our case. Carol provided bank statements showing every withdrawal Diane had made over 6 months. Aunt Patricia provided a written statement about what Mom had told her regarding the inheritance. David hired a forensic accountant to trace where the money had gone. The findings were damning. Of the $263,000 Diane had withdrawn, only $47,000 could be accounted for as legitimate medical or care-related expenses. The rest had been deposited into Diane's personal accounts. $65,000 had been used as a down payment on her new house. $30,000 had gone to pay off her husband's truck loan. $25,000 had been spent on furniture and home renovations. The forensic accountant found credit card statements showing designer handbags, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to Chicago. While our mother was dying, Diane had been shopping. David presented all of this evidence to the probate court. The judge ordered an emergency hearing and froze what little remained in Diane's accounts, about $18,000. But the worst part wasn't the legal proceedings. It was watching my family fracture. Diane had already started her campaign to paint me as the villain. She posted on Facebook about how devastated she was that her sister was suing her during their time of grief. She didn't mention why I was suing her, just made it sound like I was being greedy and cruel. My cousin Jennifer called me, crying. "How could you do this to Diane?" she asked. "She gave up everything to take care of Aunt Susan. This is how you repay her?" "Did Diane mention that she stole over $200,000 from Mom?" I asked. "She said those were medical expenses. You're twisting everything to make her look bad because you're jealous that she was the one Mom relied on at the end." "I'm not twisting anything. I have bank statements. I have medical bills. I have proof. Diane stole from our dying mother to buy a house and a car and designer purses. That's not caregiving, that's theft." But Jennifer had already made up her mind. Several other relatives had too. They saw Diane as the devoted daughter who'd sacrificed so much, and me as the ungrateful sister who'd swooped in to profit from our mother's death. The irony wasn't lost on me. The only people who stood by me were Aunt Patricia, Carol, and surprisingly, Diane's husband Marcus. 2 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, Marcus called me, asking if we could meet. We met at a coffee shop on the edge of town. Marcus looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usually neat hair disheveled. "I didn't know," he said before I could even sit down. "About the money, about how much she took. Diane told me your mom gave her the money, that it was a gift to help us buy the house since Diane had been doing all the caregiving." I believed her. "When did you find out the truth?" I asked. "When the court froze our accounts and I started asking questions. Then I went through our financial records and saw all the deposits from your mom's account. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I would never have agreed to use that money if I'd known it wasn't legitimately Diane's." "What are you going to do?" I asked. Marcus looked down at his coffee. "I told Diane I want a divorce. I can't be married to someone who would steal from their dying mother. What kind of example does that set for our kids? They're asking why Mommy and Daddy are fighting, why Aunt Rachel is in trouble. I can't lie to them anymore." I felt a wave of sympathy for Marcus and for my niece and nephew, caught in the middle of this nightmare. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I never wanted this to hurt your kids. "This isn't your fault," Marcus said firmly. "This is Diane's fault. She made these choices. She stole that money. You're just fighting to get back what your mom wanted you to have. And Rachel, I want to help. I'll testify if you need me to. I have access to all our financial records. I can show exactly where the money went." That was the turning point. With Marcus's cooperation, David was able to build an airtight case. Marcus provided receipts, bank statements, credit card bills. Everything showed that Diane had been using Mom's money for personal expenses that had nothing to do with caregiving. The court hearing was set for 3 weeks after I'd first learned about the theft. Diane showed up with her own lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Christine Valdez who specialized in defending against estate challenges. Christine's strategy was to argue that caregiving compensation was legitimate, that Diane had provided round-the-clock care worth far more than what she'd taken. She presented a calculation claiming that if Diane had been paid minimum wage for every hour of care, it would have exceeded $300,000. David countered brilliantly. He pointed out that Diane had never discussed compensation with Mom or with the family. He showed that many of the hours Christine claimed Diane was providing care, she was actually out shopping or at the gym, according to credit card timestamps. He presented testimony from home health aides who'd actually been paid to provide care, contradicting Diane's claim that she'd done everything herself. Then David called Marcus to testify. Marcus sat in the witness stand, refusing to look at Diane, and calmly explained how Diane had lied to him about where the money came from. He detailed the house purchase, the truck loan payoff, the shopping sprees. He confirmed that Diane had never mentioned needing to compensate herself for caregiving until after the lawsuit was filed. Diane's face was stone as Marcus testified. But I saw her hands shaking in her lap. The most powerful moment came when David presented Mom's own words. In a letter Mom had written to her attorney 3 years ago, when setting up her estate plan, she'd explicitly stated her wishes. "I want to leave my savings equally divided between my 2 daughters. I know Diane lives nearby and Rachel lives far away, but I love them both the same. They've both brought me joy in different ways. I want them each to have financial security as they build their futures." When the judge read those words aloud, I saw several people in the courtroom wipe their eyes. Diane stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. In the end, the judge's ruling was clear. Diane had violated her fiduciary duty as power of attorney holder. She was ordered to return all funds taken beyond legitimate medical and caregiving expenses. Since much of the money had already been spent, the judge placed a lien on Diane's new house for $65,000 and ordered her to make monthly payments of $2,000 until the full amount of $218,000 was repaid. If she failed to make payments, the house would be sold to satisfy the debt. Diane had to sell the house within 3 months. She and Marcus were already divorcing, and neither of them could afford the mortgage alone, especially not with the lien and court-ordered payments. They sold it for less than they'd paid, losing the entire down payment and then some. Diane moved into a small apartment with the kids. Marcus got his own place. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that my sister had been capable of such betrayal. Sad that my niece and nephew were paying the price for their mother's greed. But I also felt like I'd honored Mom. She'd wanted to help both her daughters, and because I'd fought back, her wishes were being respected, even if it came too late to undo all the damage. 6 months after the court ruling, I received an envelope in the mail. It was from Diane, postmarked from Marietta. Inside was a check for $2,000, the first of her court-ordered payments, and a letter. "Rachel, I've started this letter 100 times and I still don't know what to say. I'm sorry doesn't seem adequate for what I did. I betrayed Mom, I betrayed you, and I betrayed myself. I convinced myself that I deserved that money, that my caregiving earned it, that you didn't need it as much as I did. But the truth is, I was jealous. Jealous that you got to leave and build this whole life while I stayed trapped in the same small town. Jealous that Mom was so proud of your career when she talked to her friends. Jealous that you seemed so free while I felt so stuck. Taking that money felt like evening the score somehow. Like I was finally getting something you weren't. But all I did was destroy our family and lose everything that actually mattered. My husband, my kids' respect, my home, my relationship with you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I want you to know that I see now what I did, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than the person who did those things. I'm sorry, Diane." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. I thought about everything that had happened, about the sister I'd grown up with, and the stranger she'd become, about Mom and what she would want. Mom would want me to forgive. Eventually. Not immediately, Not without consequences, but eventually. She'd want me to remember that Diane was still my sister, still the girl who'd taught me to ride a bike and braided my hair before school dances. But forgiveness would take time. Maybe years. Maybe forever. For now, I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I cashed the check and deposited it into a trust fund I'd set up for my niece and nephew's college education. Diane didn't need to know that. Not yet. I used the money from Mom's estate carefully. I paid off my student loans completely. I invested a good portion of it. And I started a scholarship fund at Mom's old high school in her name, for students pursuing careers in education. Every year, 2 students would receive $5,000 each to help with college expenses. It felt right, using Mom's legacy to help other kids the way she'd always tried to help her students. A year after Mom's death, I visited her grave on what would have been her 65th birthday. I brought flowers, her favorite yellow roses, and sat on the grass beside the headstone. I did what you would have wanted, I told her, my voice quiet in the early morning air. I fought for what was right, but I'm trying not to let anger consume me. I'm trying to build something good from what you left behind. I miss you every day. I'm sorry I wasn't there at the end, but I know you understood. You always understood. The wind rustled through the trees, and I let myself believe it was Mom's way of saying she heard me, that she was proud, that she knew I'd done my best with an impossible situation. 2 years later, I'm still in Austin. My career is thriving. I've been promoted twice. The scholarship fund has helped 4 students so far, and every year I attend the award ceremony at Mom's old school, watching young faces light up when they realize their dreams just became more achievable. Diane keeps making her payments. We don't talk, but I follow her on social media from a distance. She's working as a medical assistant now, living modestly, focused on rebuilding her relationship with her kids. Marcus remarried last year, someone who seems kind and steady. The kids split time between both parents. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just let it go, if I'd accepted Diane's story about medical expenses and moved on. Life would certainly be simpler, but I'd also be teaching my niece and nephew that theft is acceptable if you're family, that lies are fine if they benefit you, that the people we love most are the ones we can betray with impunity. Instead, they're learning that actions have consequences, that integrity matters, that sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone against people you love. Mom's real gift to me wasn't the money, though that has changed my life in practical ways. Her real gift was teaching me by example that you fight for what's right even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when you're standing alone. She was a high school principal for 35 years. She never backed down from difficult conversations, never let bullies win, never sacrificed her principles for popularity. I'm my mother's daughter, and that means standing up, speaking truth, and refusing to let injustice go unchallenged, even when the injustice comes from family, especially when it comes from family.